Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker. I'm the Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, here with Chad Robichaux, the founder and president of the Mighty Oaks Foundation. And today we have what I think is a special show. It's a little bit different than we've been doing, but one that is timely, and I hope it will be an encouragement and informative to you. We have had the opportunity, the privilege over the last, 2 years, I think, to do our podcast off and on. And, those of you that are watching and don't know us don't know this, but we had a very small office in the town where we have our headquarters. And in that small office, we had an even smaller space where we had our podcast studio.
Not quite a closet, but
right, yeah, not much bigger. And to call it a studio means that it had microphones in it, and we closed the door sometimes. So we would do our podcast and had some great guests on and had a great time there. We've been blessed to move to our National Training Center, same town, different location, and it's great. We have a classroom, we have offices for everyone, and then we have a podcast studio, and then we started the Mighty Oaks Show, and man, it's been great. We are just kind of getting into this format, this video format, and hosting it primarily on YouTube. And so it's been awesome. It's cool to have the interaction. We've got some great guests, and really working through that format. And then recently, we were picked up for radio syndication through the Mojo 50 network, Mojo 50. And a really interesting story there, which I won't give you the whole story, but our first episode aired this last Saturday on Mojo 50. And for those of you that are interested, you can go to their website. Just Google them. You'll find them. Go to their website. And our time slot is Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for those of us on the West Coast, it means you have to get up at 7 o'clock to listen to us talk about things that are really important.
Well worth it. Well
worth the time. And you can
lots to say.
Train your kids to turn it on for you so you don't have to get out of bed. I mean, that's one way to do it. But you can find us there. And it's awesome. Now, what we understand, though, is that when we jump into something completely different for us, right? This isn't a podcast. It's not the YouTube hosted Mighty Oaks Show. It's a radio program. And what we understand is that there are a lot of people who don't know who Mighty Oaks is, what we do, or who, I am, who Chad is, and how we got here. And so we wanted to take this opportunity, and this is our second Mojo show. So what you're listening to right now is the second show. Last week, we had a special guest, Tim Kennedy, on with us, which was, man, what a great interview. And if you haven't heard it, you need to go back to it. But this show, we just want to take some time and talk about who we are and why we do this and where we're going with this and some of the guests that we've had. And so I hope that this is maybe an encouragement to you. It's been fun for us, and I look forward to the days ahead for sure. So first question is this, who are we, right? And again, maybe you've been following us. We have a great Facebook page. You can find us on all the social media platforms. Just search Mighty Oaks Foundation, and you can find us there, the Mighty Oaks Show on YouTube. But you may know the story, you may not. And so first thing is Chad Robichaux is the founder and president of the Mighty Oaks Foundation. And Chad, I'm going to ask you to start, if you would. Give your background. One thing the listener needs to understand is that our organization primarily serves, through our foundation, we primarily serve veterans, active duty service members, and more first responders. And so all of us involved in this come from that background. But talk about your childhood a little bit and how you ended up in the military, some of your experience, and then lead to when Mighty Oaks started.
Yeah, again, a lot of this is a reintroduction for those who have been following us and a first time introduction. So hello and welcome to all those who are hearing this first time.
Right.
My name's Chad Robichaux, and I'm a three-generation Marine Corps family. I sit in the middle. My father was a Marine who served in Vietnam. And my son Hunter is a Marine, and he's actually in Afghanistan right now serving our nation. Super proud of him. And then I was a Marine, and I joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old, and just in the childhood I grew up in, and dealing with a father who suffers with a lot of things that many of our warriors suffer with today, PTSD and anger and all the things that come along with that. Joining the Marine Corps for me was a brand new chance at life, a clean slate, and I totally embraced it. I got to fulfill my childhood dream, my first year in the Marine Corps, to become a reconnaissance Marine. And I did that job, trained for a very long time before I would ever get to do the job in combat, because I went in 1993. And it wasn't until later on, September 11th, which for the military changed the world for many, many people. Yeah. And for me, I got the very unique and rare opportunity to try out for a JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command Task Force, which was just incredible opportunity to serve. And in that capacity, I served both as a Marine and eventually had a direct contract with the DoD. And I served 8 deployments in that capacity, and to Afghanistan. And just like my father, I came back from that last deployment, and it started early on. I came back from the last deployment dealing with a lot of the things that other warriors suffer with today: post-traumatic stress disorder, a PTSD diagnosis. My life went downward spiral very quickly, but during that downward spiral, I tapped back into something I had done for a long time, which was martial arts and professional MMA fighting, and had a pretty good run. Found a lot of success in that, opened a big school. My wife and I ran it as a family business, and I fought in some of the biggest shows you'd see in MMA, and eventually won a title belt, amassed a great record. But despite those personal successes, I was still suffering with those things from Afghanistan and never dealt with. And so my family faced a near divorce, and I struggled with a battle of taking my own life. And for those who don't know, the veteran suicide rate is over 20 a day. We know it to be much higher than that, with only 50% of the states reporting. But that struggle for me was very personal. I felt very alone, and it was amazing people that came around me, starting with my wife, Kathy, and just some mentorship that helped me get on the other side of that. And part of that process was the restoration of my faith, understanding that I did have purpose moving forward, despite the fact that I felt like I had no more purpose. I had purpose moving forward, and God had created me with a very specific intent and design for my life. That discovery and revelation for me was just mind-blowing. I tapped into it at a very authentic level through a relationship with Christ. I made some very big decisions, following those decisions was a really good mentorship by a man named Steve Toth, who mentored me. And through that process of being mentored and understanding that all these things in my past that had happened to me maybe had been bad, but they didn't lead me to where I was, which was being in the closet with a pistol in my hand, trying to decide if I want to live or die. Yeah. What led me there were the choices that I had made in response to those things, and that I had an ability to choose differently by stepping into the life that I believe I was created to live. And that revelation for me led me to some restoration in my relationship with my wife, my family, and other people. It led me to hope for the first time, and it gave me ultimately what I sought my whole life for, and what I believe we all need and we're created to have, and that's purpose. And when I found that purpose, fire was lit underneath me, and that manifested in the desire and ultimately the feeling of an obligation and a calling to start Mighty Oaks Foundation. It was really not a wise idea in my life at the time. Kathy and I were still bleeding ourselves, but we had felt like we were dying of cancer, and Steve Toth had given us the cure and the solution to this problem that not only I had faced, and I thought I was the only one at the time, but now I'm discovering other people were facing 20 plus suicides a day. At the time, I think the number was 22, and rampant divorces in our veteran community. And so me and Kathy are sitting here like, wow, we went through this and we feel like we have the solution. We don't want to share it. We feel obligated to share it. And so we started Mighty Oaks Foundation, and it's been the most incredible journey, which has led us here, to do this today, this show. But Mighty Oaks originally began by offering programs to help those who were in the same situation I was in, who served in the military, who've been to combat, who were diagnosed maybe with PTSD, who were battling with, do I want to live? Do I want to die? Do I want to be one of these veterans to suicide statistics? Do I want to divorce my family? All these tough, difficult things that military service members were facing come to this program that we set up, and now it's called the Legacy Program, and be challenged and given the same support and direction that I was given that solution. Today, we run 30 of those programs per year at 4 different ranches around the country: Ohio, Virginia, California, Texas. And Jeremy Jeremy leads that up on that side, and I'm sure he's going to tell you a little bit more about that. But we we run these programs, and veterans come from active duty. The military sends them on orders from the veteran community, as well as the first responder community, and also their spouses. And we pay for everything through the incredible support of a grateful nation of Americans who get behind Mighty Oaks and support us financially to pay for all these programs. And these veterans come to our programs, and these active duty warriors come to our programs. And that includes the travel, by the way. Yep. And so as we were developing and starting to impact these guys who had been through the hard times, we discovered that the same things that would help them recover, if they could be given on the front end, they can help our warriors be more resilient. And so we really focused on a kind of split our efforts from the recovery side to the resiliency side. And that's where I spend a lot of my time. I'm traveling to probably about 30 bases a year around the world by request from military commands. And we go and we speak on resiliency, understanding what it takes to be a warrior, a prepared warrior, combat-ready warrior, and what it means to be resilient, able to do the things that warriors have to do and bounce back and be able to reintegrate home as husbands and wives and fathers and mothers and eventually civilians again. Just be people who could move past their military service and not let those experiences crush them, but actually make them stronger and more productive in life and purposeful moving forward. And so our resiliency effort's been an incredible effort. We've spoken to well over 100,000 active duty troops. Jeremy and I has produced several books that we distribute during our speaking events. We give over 80,000 books away. And as this resiliency effort started to grow, we thought, man, we have a message that people are resonating with. We have some guidance and wisdom that people we want to share and people are calling to us for. And so we decided to start the Mighty Oaks podcast at a time today, the Mighty Oaks Show. And to share those lessons and wisdom that we've learned from others and pass it on, pay it forward, and answer tough questions that's going on. And one of the things I get to do a lot too, aside from this show, is I get to go to other people's show. And Glenn Beck at the Blaze has been just incredible to us, incredible friend to us. And I was going on Glenn Beck's show, and I went on the Think Tank and the Doc Thompson show. And both when the Think Tank and Doc Thompson show, I met Doc Thompson, and we hit it off, had some great interviews, and he ended up starting the Mojo 50 network. And through our relationship with him and through his incredible team there, the tragically late Doc Thompson invited us to be part of the Mojo 50 show and team. And we're just happy to take the things that we have at Mighty Oaks and share it beyond our own audience into a bigger audience, a broader audience throughout everyone listening, I'd say throughout the nation, nationally syndicated, but maybe throughout the world. Who knows who's listening where? And it's my hope and prayer that we can say something valuable, that we can build a great relationship, a family through this network, and to be able to speak on important topics that need to be spoken about in our country, our nation, and this world. I think right now a lot of these conversations are hijacked by political activists and mainstream media, and we want to be able to speak on these topics as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we met. Let's see. It was the second Mighty Oaks Foundation or Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs program
yes.
in West Cliff, Colorado, back in 2012. And my journey to Mighty Oaks was different than most. I think most of the people that come to our program, at least in the early days, were in a really bad spot personally. And I was just not that guy. I was there because at the time, you were trying to get kind of the program off the ground, right?
Yeah. And I needed bodies.
Yeah, veterans are like
people.
Super cynical and don't trust anyone. And so you start a veteran nonprofit, and you say everything's free, you just need to come. And veterans are like, what's the catch? I'm not going. So Chad reached out to one of the guys that I actually served in Iraq with and said, hey, I'm going to run a program. I need to get some folks there. If you can get some of your platoon to attend, then we'll put a program on for them, kind of a reunion of sorts, but really more than anything, an opportunity to continue to develop this week-long program. And that's how I ended up there. And my journey there, was different. I was raised in a Christian home, a very conservative Christian home. In fact, my dad was a pastor, and grew up in that home, had good influences in my life. My parents are still married, doing well, and that was the foundation that I had. I remember telling my dad when I was 14 that I wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps. And he said, anything but that, right? Which I think a lot of parents have probably said at one point or another. And so put me on a path to maybe try to get me off of that. I don't know. But a path that ended up in going to college. And then I was eventually commissioned as an officer in the Marine Corps, an infantry officer in the Marine Corps, which was awesome. And really, for me, the fulfillment of a lifelong dream, which, there are a lot of things I've done wrong, but that isn't one of them. I would never change that. It was amazing. Served with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines as a platoon commander. Did a non-combat deployment to Okinawa and then came back. And you know the story. 9/11 happened, and all of our lives changed. I remember a couple of years ago talking to someone who didn't know my background, and we were talking about 9/11. And I said that was a day that changed my life forever. And this person looked at me and said, "How did it change your life?" How would it change? How it changed my life? It changed not only what I ended up doing, but the people I work with and serve, the job that I have. It changed everything for me and for a lot of other people, of course. And one of the things that it did was it caused us to deploy to Afghanistan, which I did not deploy to Afghanistan, but my battalion with the 1st Marine Division in 2003 ended up in January 2003 in Kuwait on the border of Iraq. And we sat there for a while. Eventually, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines with the rest of the division would breach the berm between Kuwait and Iraq, and we secured the first objective of the war. And then eventually our battalion ended up in Baghdad, and that was my combat deployment, right? A weird thing happened. When I was a kid, I told my dad I didn't want to go into ministry. I wanted to go in the Marine Corps, but as it is, sometimes that changed. And shortly before that Iraq deployment, I was offered a job by my pastor, the pastor of our church. And he said, "Hey, I don't know what I'll have you do exactly, but if you are interested in getting out of the Marine Corps, I'll have a place for you on the staff, and we'll plug you in." And I didn't have a ministry degree. I have a criminal justice degree. I didn't know a lot about ministry other than what I had observed, but I wanted to stay there. And so I said, all right, I'll get out of the Marine Corps. And did. We came home from Iraq in June of 2003. July 1st, I was out of the Marine Corps and went to work on a church staff. And that was a really difficult transition for me. And I could talk a lot about that. But the transition was hard because I lost myself somewhere in all of that. And it took me about a year to figure some of that stuff out. But what's different, I think, between my story and many others is that I went to combat with a solid faith foundation. I left a strong family behind. I left a strong church community behind. And so when I came back and I started to struggle, I had those people around me that could help me and really allowed me to go through the process I needed to pretty quickly, and got to the point where I was thankful for my military service, but I didn't want to look back anymore. And so, a lot of guys get out of the Marine Corps and all they talk about is the Marine Corps. I got out of the Marine Corps, and the last thing I wanted to talk about was the Marine Corps. I felt, like I had continued to look back over my shoulder when I came home, and again, caused some problems in my family and other places. I just didn't want to do that anymore. So it went from working on a church staff for a number of years. I eventually pastored a church up in the San Francisco area, not the most conservative area in our country, but I had a great church experience there, and pastored. And 10 years later, so 10 years after I left the Marine Corps, this mutual friend of ours, Jeremy Mahon, was a fighter and trainer in Houston, knows Chad, and was one of my guys in Iraq, called me up and said, "Hey, I met this guy, and he's got this program, he's doing this thing, and I don't know what it's all about, but would you be interested in coming?" And at that time in my life, I was in a pretty healthy place. I was pastoring a church. Not that pastors are necessarily healthy, but I was in a pretty healthy place, and my family was doing well. And I went there to support those guys more than anything, and to see what it was all about. I mean, to understand how a program for veterans that's a Christian program, a faith-based program, could actually work. And I didn't understand it. And so went and watched it, and that's where we met. And we've been working together ever since. So eventually stepped away from the church and took a full-time position with the foundation. And somehow, I don't know when the decision was made because I don't remember being asked, but became the executive director of the foundation. So I'm not sure. It's one of those by default things, I think. Like, he needs to do this. Raise your hand if you're not busy. Yeah. I think I must have raised my hand. I didn't know the question. And so it's been awesome. And as Chad said, we have tremendous privilege and opportunity, really an honor to serve those who have served us. And I'll tell you, for me, getting involved with Mighty Oaks, really it goes back to that first program when, I'd walked away kind of from that background in a lot of ways. And I was living under the assumption or the belief that when you put your uniform in the closet after your service, that you're done serving, you've done your part, and that's it. What I realized was that if you have served, it doesn't matter if you have put your uniform back in the closet, you still have an obligation to serve those that you've served. And it was that first Mighty Oaks session that I went to where I talked to those guys that I had served with, and I realized, a lot of the guys that I went to Iraq with and brought home, and I was thankful for, had killed themselves, if not killed themselves, left their families. They were in, a mess personally. Some of them succeeded and others failed dramatically. And understanding that I had a responsibility to continue to try to help those guys and take care of them. And I had the opportunity to do that through Mighty Oaks. And so it's been a great privilege and honor. We've seen so many people come through our program, and it's amazing. I think it'd be worth even talking about how we do what we do, right? We talk about who we serve and that, but
Right.
I think our approach is different, and that's what makes us different. Of those numbers that Chad mentioned that we've had come through our week-long sessions,
2,600 graduates now.
2,600 graduates over the last 8 years. We have dealt with, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but some folks who are very prone to suicide, many who have attempted suicide, some extremely difficult situations. And God's been good to us. We have seen a lot of health and healing, and with the suicide rates the way that they are in the last 8 years, tragically, we have had one of our alumni, one of our graduates, he took his life this last year. And as tragic as that is, we're thankful for the 2,600 other folks who haven't, and many of whom are doing great and paying it forward for others.
Yeah. I think it's one of the greatest things about Mighty Oaks, right? Is for me, being the first, and I say this a lot, but a lot of people give me credit as being the founder and the first one to start Mighty Oaks, which really, if you really know my story, I was the first student of Mighty Oaks, and first person helped. And then, the starting of Mighty Oaks was a tremendous amount of, I wouldn't say just pressure, but a lot of unknown of how it's going to accomplish this. And that's been the success that has been orchestrated. And I would give full credit to God because I'm not smart enough. Looking back in the rearview mirror, it's been orchestrated by this incredible just combination of supporters who have come along and believed in us and supported us both through, financial and consultation and prayer and all these different ways that people support us. Yep. But then our staff, starting with you, Jeremy. I can speak towards you. Coming along at the right time, being the right guy, and bringing those skills and experiences that you have had, both from being an infantry officer in the Marine Corps to being a pastor to running a church and an organization, and just coming together. And then, we have, with our full-time and part-time staff, we have almost around 50 employees.
Yeah, our staff is incredible. Yeah, the people who make it happen are incredible human beings.
Yeah, and it's just, from our, from Ann, doing our books, and Michael behind the camera right there doing, running the production and marketing communications to the guys who are running the programs. We got retired Marine Corps Colonel Bill Coate, as a program manager, Brandon Kunith, retired Marine Corps, infantry staff sergeant. We have with Luis Rivera on staff, a 23-year retired Navy SEAL. Yeah. We just, I just think I could go on and on and on, 50 names of just how blessed and how incredible our team is. And it just absolutely just, when I stop and think about it sometimes, it just amazes me. And it's no surprise that we have able to do the work that we get to do.
Yeah. One of the things that we've done, I think two things. One is we've maintained kind of a faith-based philosophy, right? And early on, people said, if you hang on to this faith component, if you say things like a relationship with God is really important, if you do that, then you'll never have access to the active duty community. And that just has not been the case. Our experience with that over the last 8 years has been the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, not only has it been complete opposite, some of the people that said that to us don't have access to active duty troops, and we do. And I say that outside of a competitive spirit, although I'm a pretty competitive person. Uh, I do wish that anyone that has a heart to help veterans, an authentic heart to help veterans, would have access to them. However, the truth is we have pretty unprecedented access. I mean, we get at least half of our guys that come to us are on military orders. We are invited constantly to military bases at the highest levels. You and I will be speaking for the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps here this summer for the Sergeant Major Symposium at the Pentagon. And it's not uncommon for us to go to places like the Pentagon and speak on behalf of serving warriors. The Marine Corps, allows me to go speak at Marine Corps boot camp and speak to these young recruits. After 4 years now, by the way,
yep.
Every quarter, right in the beginning of their service, and be able to speak to them about not just being mentally and physically tough, but being spiritually tough, what that actually means. And in this topic of spirituality and faith-based programs and that pushback on it, I think is important. For us, a really important thing that we could talk about right now. It's what it actually means. Does it mean that we are a Christian organization serving Christians? And that couldn't be further from the truth.
That's right.
We have a pretty rough crowd that comes up to our ranches. I mean, I would say that about half of the guys that come would even share our faith. The other half would say they're atheist or agnostic or Buddhist or whatever they might claim to be.
Yep.
But they're coming to our program because they tried other things didn't work. Maybe they knew a friend that came through and it worked for them. And so they come up and give us a chance when nothing else is working.
Yep.
And talk a little bit about what it means to be Mighty Oaks to be a faith-based program. What it means and what it doesn't mean.
Yeah, I mean, a faith-based program means that we approach this issue of really life trauma. We'll call it post-traumatic stress disorder, but beyond that is life trauma, because you say this a lot, I say this a lot. Veterans don't have the market on trauma. A lot of veterans think they do. Veterans think that they're unique somehow because they've had trauma in their lives. I just had the opportunity to interview the two chiefs here in our city, chief of police, chief of the fire department, talking about the trauma that our first responders deal with. But we could even talk about people who don't have a life of service, those who have been abused as children, many who have had severe trauma in relationships in their lives. And I mean, vehicle accidents, you name it, trauma is something that is part of the human experience, right? And so when we say a faith-based program, what we're really talking about is looking at trauma and looking at the brokenness that life often comes with from a faith position, maybe more easily understood as a creation perspective. We approach this thing understanding, believing that there is a creator, and we could spend all day talking about that, but there is a creator. And if there's a creator, then there's also a design. And if there's a design, then really the goal should be for us that we figure out what that design is, and then align the way that we live to that design. So if we're living within our created context, if we're living the way that we were created to live, the trauma doesn't go away, the memories don't go away, the relationships aren't always restored, but we're able to move forward in spite of those things. Those things don't need to define us because we're living according to our creation. And so we find purpose in that. Our purpose is to live according to our creation. There's hope, there's direction, and there's all those things. And people get that wrong sometimes. And I've said this, and you've said this as well, Chad, that we would call ourselves a faith-based organization so people understand where we're coming from. But we're really not a ministry in that sense. We are an organization of people who believe what we're talking about. And the VA has some great programs. There's some great counseling programs. There's other things that deal with trauma. And people have access to that. But what we do is we say, look, there is a plan. And if you can understand that plan, these things don't have a hold on you anymore. And I think that's a really important distinction. So when you come to one of our sessions or you come to hear us speak somewhere, that's what you're going to hear. And that means that you don't have to even necessarily agree with what we're doing or what we're saying or what we believe. We would ask the question, if what you're doing isn't working, and most of the people that come to us would say what I'm doing isn't working, then what we're going to do is give you a different perspective on that and let you make a decision as to what you do with that.
Yeah, I was just on I was on the Chad Prather show a really, really great time on his show.
Shout out to Chad Prather.
Shout out to Chad Prather. Awesome guy.
Yep.
Yeah. He's a man. What a patriot. What a patriot. And this awesome guy. His wife too, and his whole staff there. Shout out to Party Foul Steve, the fellow Marine. Party Foul Steve's a fellow Marine on his show. But I was on his show, and we got a great response. I think his show's been up with me on it. But it's been up for
a couple days,
a day and a half, and it's already had like 120,000 views. But I was, kind of scrolling the hundreds of comments on it, and I came across this one, and I was like, I was really moved by it. I snapped a picture, and it's this guy Carl Pearson wrote. He said, "I'm not a Christian, but this is beautiful." And so, he heard what I had to say, and what I had to say was not about me touting about my successes, is about me talking about my failures.
Sure.
and the restoration that I found in my life by just doing exactly what you said, aligning my life to the life I was created to live when nothing else worked, when the pills didn't work, when the counseling didn't work, when the sports and MMA and jiu-jitsu didn't work. I made a choice by people who challenged me to make a decision to align my life to the life I was created to live. And everything in my life radically changed. And so this guy, Carl, here's my story. And he says, "I'm not a Christian. This is awesome." And we hear this so much because people who aren't, wouldn't believe the same thing we believe. They observe our program. They observe those who go through our program. And this happens a lot with military commanders. And, we've talked about this a lot in the past, where people will say, how could someone go to these inpatient clinical programs for 6 months,
right,
and come back and end up exactly where they are, go right back to where they came from, and they go to Mighty Oaks for 6 days, and their lives radically change. And they come back and not only change, but now they're trying to recruit everyone, like if Mighty Oaks is some kind of cult or something.
Right.
And this is the answer, and the answer because we've shared this before. It's not 6 months, it's not 6 weeks, it's not 6 days, it's not even 6 minutes. It's that one moment.
Yep.
That one moment where a man or woman makes a decision to do what you said. They make a decision in that moment to align their lives with the lives they are created to live. And in that decision, it doesn't mean that the things they had in the past go away. Right. It means they're going to respond to them differently. In fact, they're going to respond to them in the very way they were created to respond. And they're going to witness the same thing I witnessed, is radical change in their life.
Yeah.
A change of heart, a change of perspective, a change of direction, and a changed future. And it's a future that they were intended to live.
And so much of that is based on a decision, right? It's that personal responsibility. It's saying, there are a lot of issues in my life, but I can't control those things. What I can control is what I do now. And I'm going to make a decision to move forward. Our methodology is something that's often questioned, and it's fun because, and this is something, when I went to the first session that I went to, that's something I was interested in, right? Like, what's the methodology here? And the methodology really is saying, if there is a plan, then let's look at it and understand what that plan is, and you can decide what you want to do with that. It's not a Sunday school thing or a church program. It's saying, hey, if you live as a person of character, you're going to do better in your relationships, right? So have some character. If you have real discipline, then you're going to do better in your job. So let's talk about that. And it's really that simple, isn't it?
Yeah, man, I look back and I think, man, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I'm so glad I didn't know you before you came to the program. I would have never been able to do it, man. I would have been so nervous because, one, you know more than me about this subject.
Yeah, I don't know about
that. and two, I got to know you, and I know you're pretty cynical. I'd have been so worried about every word that came out of my mouth. So I'm thankful I didn't know you and presented this thing that at that time in my life, I didn't know a lot, but what I did know was that I was passionate about what had happened to me.
Yeah.
And I just had this fire lit inside of me to share it. Yeah. I don't think that passion's went away. I've gained more knowledge since then. I've gained a lot more wisdom, and maybe picked up some of your cynical nature because of the work that we do could kind of jade you a little bit.
Working with people will do that to you.
But man, I was so passionate to share that, that's one thing of all the growth and things that have happened in Mighty Oaks. That's one thing that hasn't changed for me, is just that passionate belief that wherever anyone is in their life, from the worst case scenarios to the people that have it okay, but just maybe a little 1 degree off, that if they simply make the decision to be intentional about the way they live, and when I say being intentional, it means intentionally living the life that we were intended to
Yep.
live in, and living in accordance to that, daily choices that we make. I mean, our curriculum and methodology at Mighty Oaks, someone might think when they hear about a PTSD program or combat trauma program that deals with combat veterans in a faith base, they may not even understand what kind of classes we have. And if they looked at our curriculum, and some have, like, how does this make any sense? Like,
Yep.
our classes are like character, discipline, margin, how you manage your time.
Yep.
Somebody might look at it as, what's managing your time have to do with PTSD and combat trauma? It has everything to do with it, right? If you have anxiety, if you have stress, if your life's upside down and you're trying to squeeze 26 hours in a 24-hour day, that's not going to help,
Right.
right?
Right.
But you don't have to figure this all on your own. It was already laid out for you. You
Yep.
just have to read the owner's manual, right? People say life doesn't have a handbook, but it does. You
Yeah,
just have to
it
read
does.
it.
Right. And communicate it from a place of experience, right? I've heard you say this many times, and this is absolutely the case. I'm thankful for our curriculum. We've worked hard on it. We've edited and developed and changed and shifted. We continue to do that. I'm thankful for good books. I'm thankful for good methodology. I'm thankful for all of those things. But more than any of those things, I think the reason we're successful during that 5 or 6 days is, we've got a women's program going on right now. So we've got our men's program, we've got our women's program, and they're up there helping wives and helping active duty service members. And the reason it works is because the people who are standing in front of that class, teaching the classes, are teaching those classes, sharing that information from a place of experience.
Right.
Testimony. We all have a testimony. Testimony is a church word. It just means your story. You've got one. We all have one. And I think that's the real power in what we, Mighty Oaks have the opportunity to do.
It is. I mean, it's the reason. And by the way, notice where we are while this women's program's going on. as far away as humanly possible. Yeah. Yeah. Not that we don't like women. We both like women. We have wives.
Yeah.
But
we like women.
Yeah. But we don't like being around 40 women who are angry at their husbands in one place. So we'll let our women's staff handle that.
And they're doing a good job.
Yeah, they're doing a great job. But no, you're absolutely right. With the women's program, men's program that we have, it's very important that we differ ourselves from the clinical world.
Right.
And I say that with the utmost respect to clinic, because I do believe that there is value in clinicians and therapists and psychologists. I mean, don't do away with all those folks, but it has to be alternatives, right? And we are an alternative. And where we differ very much is many veterans or people who have been through a very traumatic experience will disqualify someone who's speaking from theory, from speaking from something they've read in a book, regardless of how long they went to college for it and how smart they may be.
Even if it's true, right? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. They disqualify the messenger because you can't feel what I feel. You haven't experienced what I've experienced. You can't relate to me. And so because regardless of your education, regardless of your experience, I'm not going to hear what you have to say, whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
And is that right? Probably not. The person that needs the help should be able to see beyond that. But oftentimes the reality is they can't. I couldn't. I can't speak and say that they should listen. But what Mighty Oaks offers differently is that personal testimony. All of our instructors are got people who came through our program, experienced hardships of life. In fact, all of our male instructors are combat veterans for that reason, so they can't be disqualified.
Yeah.
And they're able to stand in front of them and say, hey, not only have I been to combat, not only have I served, but I struggled. I fell on my face. But I got back up and I found the way forward. And I may not have it all figured out, but hey, let me show you the direction I'm going.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're able to say it from a very important perspective, and that's from personal experience. And they're able to do it in a way that demonstrates vulnerability and transparency, which for our methodology is very important. And so when warriors come up to our program, right away, right out of the gate, we're able to demonstrate this is a place that you could be open, because we're not going to tell you to, hey, trust us, just share what you're struggling with, tell us about your problems. That's not how that works.
Right.
Whether it's in a program or one-on-one, sitting across from each other with a cup of coffee, you don't say like, hey, I'm here to help you, I'm going to solve all your stuff, tell me what your deepest, darkest secrets are.
Right.
No, that's not. You demonstrate it, right? You stand in front of them and say, hey, let me tell you about some things that I struggle with. Let me tell you about some times that I failed and fell on my face but got back up again. And that's what our team does. And when they're able to show that in a way that's very vulnerable, very transparent, that's not very common actually in this world, in this culture today, to talk about failures.
Right.
I think that really opens a door for people to finally decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to open up and I'm going to make some decisions here to get help.
Yep. And that's the right way. But it's not only the right way for veterans. We happen to be veterans. We come from that community, and that's who we're focused on. But it's the right way for everyone. So that not only helps the student, right, but it helps the person who's communicating that story.
Absolutely.
The people who are probably helped the most are the instructors who are telling their story and sharing, some of their shortfalls.
Well, that's what we see as an organization. That's who we see the most growth from, right?
Right.
About a little over 25% of our graduates sign up for our leadership program to continue on and be discipled to be Mighty Oaks peer leaders and teach. And the people that we see the most growth from is not just the graduates of our program, but those who go into the leadership program. And a couple of reasons. One, it could be, they're the type of people that want to go deeper and further. It could be, so was it cause or effect? I don't know.
Yeah.
They're gonna learn more because they have to study more to qualify to be a team leader. But I really believe that the biggest piece of growth is that not talking about wanting to pay it forward, but the act of paying it forward.
Right. That's right.
Say, hey, these terrible things happen in my life, and maybe I wish they didn't happen. Maybe I'm okay that they happened, right? But whatever the case is, like they're gonna have that. Those terrible things are gonna have value now because they're gonna be part of the process of helping someone else get up off the ground and move forward.
I think one of the things that's really beautiful about that, and it's taken me a long time to see it, this way, and I think we talked about this recently, is that truly is an act of redemption. We use that word in the Christian world. When we talk about redemption as Christians, what we mean is that even though we're broken and sinful and can't have a relationship with God on our own, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, he paid for our sin and made that redemption possible. It took us who were, so broken we couldn't have a relationship with God, and made that relationship possible. We just celebrated this on Easter, right? Well, that word redemption, it means to add value or give value to that which is valueless or worthless, or to set free. And what's crazy about telling your story and talking about the past and using the past to help other people is that is redemptive. It gives value. It adds value to your past. It adds value to that hurt and that trauma and that brokenness. Now it's not a worthless act. It's something that you can use to add value to other people, and then it sets people free. It's a redemptive act that really flows, I think, from even the redemption that we have through Jesus. It's an amazing thing. It's a powerful thing, and it's so simple.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us miss it, right? It really is powerful.
Yeah, I get asked a lot because, anybody who's heard me speak, I'm pretty transparent about, in an uncomfortable way, transparent about some of my past. And I've been asked a lot. I've actually just recently, yesterday, I was having coffee with Pastor Ron Merrill, my church here in Arizona. And he's like, is it hard, like, still for you to get up and talk about this kind of ugly parts of your past? And it's not, I wouldn't say it's hard. It's embarrassing. But the most important part of why I speak is to share the story of redemption, to try to cast hope on others that might have faced some of the same things I faced, or whether it's exactly or not. And I can't accomplish that goal by leaving out the dark, bad things. I think a lot of times people want to talk about, things got better. This is what it looked like on the other side, but they leave out those valleys. They talk about the peaks, but leave out those valleys.
Yep.
And you can't really appreciate the peaks unless you see the valleys.
Yeah, sure.
And so and particularly, for me, as a Christian, I want to point to the one person the one who gave me this life that I have now, and it's God, and sort of glorify God. I have to not just talk about the good parts. I have to talk about the ugly parts to show that contrast and show where I came from. Yep. And I think that's the secret to reaching people who have the same struggles, but they're holding me aside, to know, like, oh, wow, he just said something that I could resonate with because I'm struggling with that. I thought I was the only one struggling with that.
Yeah.
That thought, that temptation, that sin, that that shortfall, that failure. I thought I was the only one struggling with that. And here's a guy who faced the same things. He's actually speaking it out loud, and I connect to it, and he made it past it.
Yep.
Or he's making it past it. He's working towards it. He knows he may not have it figured out, but he knows the direction he's going.
Yep.
And I want to go there too.
And that's powerful for anyone, right? It's not just veterans. it's everyone. And it's whatever your story is, however, catastrophic it may be, or however seemingly boring it may be. Your story is your story. It's something that God gave to you, and it's something that you absolutely can use to help other people. I think of, my wife having been in ministry for a long time and talking to women completely outside of the military. Often it's talking mom to mom, saying, hey, I've had the same struggles. I know what you're going through. I don't always like my kids. I've had these struggles, and I know what you're going through, and you can get through it. That's someone leveraging their story to help others. And it can go from that, all the way to a lot of the stuff that we deal with. We see this in the first responders community. Men and women, firefighters, police officers, talking about their struggles. And when they do that, it makes that conversation okay. And making that conversation okay really leads to healing. And that can be anywhere along that continuum and that spectrum. It's a super powerful thing to be willing to use your story, as embarrassing as it may be, or whatever, use it for the benefit of others.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, so how's all that tie into the show we're on right now, right? We're on the radio show, we're on the radio, we're on Mojo 50, pumped to be here. I think iHeartRadio too. We're a lot of people listening. Yep. And they're like, oh, great, you guys have a foundation, you're helping veterans.
Yeah.
I love that, but what's it got to do with the radio show?
Yeah, yeah.
or the podcast, right? What's that have to do with that?
Yeah, so you mentioned this a little while ago, but as we have done this work, more and more people have reached out to us, and they reach out through Facebook or other social media. Maybe they find our email address on our website, or at a speaking event, or whatever the case. And they ask questions. They ask questions about a lot of these things. You tell the story about the first time you told your story, right? You spoke.
Yeah, I was blown away.
Yeah,
I never wanted to speak.
Because of the non-veterans that responded, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. I never wanted to speak. I remember when we first got started at Mighty Oaks, Dave Reaver was big into speaking. He was kind of mentoring us, and we were running a program. I'm like, hey, I love teaching. I love running programs, but what you're doing, getting in front of all these people and speaking, yeah, I'm not down for that.
Right.
And I did. He talked me into it, and he kind of conned me into going to speak at this. He called it a little church, and ended up being like a church of like 20-something thousand people, and Resurrection Life Church in Michigan, if you're listening.
Yeah.
That's where we're at, and I spoke there. And I remember when I spoke the first time, I'm sharing my story of Afghanistan and coming home, and my struggle with PTSD and anxiety, depression, almost taking my life, like all these things related to the military and the restoration of my family. And I came off from one of those services and started talking to this line of people, and this lady was just in tears, and she was saying how something I said encouraged her as she was dealing with the loss of her son who had died from a drunk driver. And I was like, how the heck did my story impact you that way? I didn't understand at that time. I couldn't put it together, the two and two together.
Yep.
And then a man came and he said, I've been separated from my family. We're actually in the same church service. It's a big church. My wife and kids are on one side of the church. I'm on the other side. And he's like, because of what you said, I'm gonna be taking my wife and children out to lunch after church. And I was like, yeah. And that just really encouraged me and inspired me to that, my message had value beyond just the veteran community.
Right. And from that point, we continue to understand this and see this more and more and more. So made a decision a few years ago that we would produce some resources. And that started off with, you wrote a book, kind of when you're getting started. But I think organizationally, the first thing we did for a resource was that little book called The Path to Resiliency. And I think 90 pages, kind of a pocket-sized book, right? That talks about how to have a resilient life. And we produced that as a resource. And now, Chad, when you speak at boot camp, you give those to the recruits, which is crazy. But we give it out. How many? 60,000 of those? Something like that? 70,000?
I think we're at 80,000 now.
80,000? Yeah, I'm not good with math. So 80,000 of those. And that's been a great resource. So from there, we went to another little booklet called The Truth About PTSD. And if you look at the graphic there, the D is small.
Yeah.
But another small book, real easy read. You can sit down and read it through in one sitting. But talking about post-traumatic stress from a non-clinical standpoint, from a faith-based perspective. And that's been a tremendous help to people. You've written books. You wrote a book called An Unfair Advantage, talking about your time in the military and some spiritual lessons drawn from that. I've written a few books. So we continue to produce these resources. And all of these, by the way, can be found on the Mighty Oaks website, mightyoaksprograms.org. You can go to our store and find those.
Well, you plugged my book, I plug yours, and March or Die. March or Die is awesome.
Yeah, March or Die. That was the motto of the first platoon that I was in the Marine Corps, Charlie Company 1-5. And it's just a book that talks about pursuing or pushing through the obstacles in life using some of my experiences in Iraq. So we produce these resources, and I always joke that, I'm the executive director, so I worry about money a lot. And our business model for our books is that we're going to lose money. That's kind of the business model.
Not a good business model.
Not a good business model, no. So we give away, far more resources than we sell. And when we sell them, it's just so we can give more away, right? So we continue to produce these resources. And then as we're going along, still more questions. And then we thought we could have a podcast where we have guests come on and talk about some of these issues. And then those podcasts are archived and people can go and listen to them, and they live forever.
We've had some great guests, right? I just want to pause for a minute and talk about, you think about how blessed we are to have some of the guests. We've had Glenn Beck. Well, we've been on a lot of his shows. He's on our podcast. We've Alan West, Congressman Alan West, who's an advisory board member from Mighty Oaks. He's been on. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin.
Yep.
One of my heroes.
Times.
Yeah, we've had, who else?
David Barton's been a big one. He's been a great encouragement to us. And then, kind of the different categories. We've had military leaders. We've had pastors. We've had ministry folks, non-ministry folks, just so many different perspectives. But the goal is always the same, right? It's to provide perspective and direction on these issues of life trauma, life difficulties, and overcoming obstacles. And it's been incredible. So we did our podcast, an audio podcast, which it still lives. If you are interested in finding that, go look for the Mighty Oaks Show. You can find the podcasts, the audio podcasts. And then this year we started the Mighty Oaks Show, which is us continuing to do our very best to push out additional resources. And that lives on the Mighty Oaks Show YouTube page, which you can go to YouTube and search Mighty Oaks Show if you haven't done that. And just in the last couple of months, we've had some great guests. We had Tim Kennedy on not too long ago.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We've had just so many different folks who have come and talked to us, some of our own program guys telling their stories and explaining, how they move forward in spite of so many of the obstacles that they've dealt with. Chad and I have talked about some issues that are current and things that are going on in our world right now, trying to provide some perspective on that. And we continue to do that. I mean, this week alone, we've interviewed chief of police, chief of the fire department here in our city, talking about these trauma issues in the first responders community. Talked to 2 Marine Corps veterans just this morning who are really giving back in a great way and doing some great things for veterans. And we continue to have these conversations. And the goal is the same. It's not just to have a show. There are a lot of great shows out there. I mean,
Yeah, no shortage of them if you want to find a great show.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope to be entertaining, but entertaining is not the goal. The goal is to provide resources for real people, veterans or not, who want to know how to move forward, how to maintain hope and purpose and direction in their lives, and to understand that through the stories and the testimonies of the people we interview.
Yeah, I think at times, when, if I catch a current event topic that I think is being hijacked by, political activists or mainstream media, and they've kind of trying to own a topic like the pro-life, pro-choice issue. I'm a big pro-lifer, and this has been a topic that I think has got hijacked as a political topic.
Yeah,
and it's not a political topic.
No,
so
right.
We want to be able to bring context around some of those topics that we believe are being hijacked by mainstream media and political activists, and say, hey, this is not something that just is important on voter ballots. This is important to humanity, to life, to the sanctity of life, and we're going to talk about it. Recently we did one on the border wall, and what it could be a very controversial topic, and it's became an issue of, is America compassionate, or is America not compassionate? Well, yep. That's not a political issue. That's an issue that it may be some political ties to it, but the topic of compassion is a topic that we want to be able to talk about outside of the political spectrum.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about those kind of things.
Yep. And we'll continue to do that. And again, our commitment to you is to have great guests and have great conversations. And if you will listen, I believe that you'll walk away with something that'll make you a better person. You look like you want to say something. I can see it. I can see it in your face.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
All right. Okay. So, where can you find us? How do you listen to us? How do you follow us? I'll give you a few things, and maybe write these down, or you go back and listen to this later. But if you want to know more about our foundation, kind of our full-time job, MightyOaksPrograms.org, MightyOaksPrograms.org. You can go to our website, and really all of these links are found on our website. We have a blog there that we have a lot of different contributors to, resources on our program. Again, our program is free to those who attend. We'll even cover travel if we need to one of our 4 locations. If you know someone who needs that, send them over to MightyOaksPrograms.org. For our YouTube show, you can go to YouTube and then search for Mighty Oaks Show. You'll find us there. Please subscribe, share it with others that may need to enjoy the content, but learn from it. And we'd love to have you join us there. For those of you that are listening on Mojo or would like to, again, Mojo50, you can find their website by Googling it. They have a great Twitter feed as well. And I'd encourage you to go there and find us or listen to us every Saturday morning, 10 Eastern Standard Time in the morning, 7 on the West Coast. And I'd love to have you join us there. The podcast is found everywhere that podcasts are found. Our old shows are there as well. So a lot of great information for you to listen to. And I'd love to have you do that. Personally, we have kind of all the social media channels. Chad is super active on Instagram, and you can find him there. I'm not super active anywhere, but I'm probably the most active, at least right now, on Twitter. If you'd like to find me on Twitter, I'd love to have you join the conversation there. And we would love to continue to encourage and help you and those that you know. Anything we can do, certainly, we're here to serve.
And I think we're keeping most of our news up on our Mighty Oaks Facebook page.
Yeah, that's right.
And man, definitely follow us on the Mighty Oaks Facebook page. But when you visit our website, MightyOaksPrograms.org, we have a sign up for our newsletter. And Michael and our marketing communications team, they will do a good job of keeping you updated with everything we do at Mighty Oaks and plugged in. We definitely, our news and information that we get out is a way you can join the Mighty Oaks family.
Yeah, that's right. And we've got a lot of good things going on, and look forward to continuing this conversation with you. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to sharing this time together next time.
Yeah. Talk to you again soon. God bless.